Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Outlook Business Advantage India Chemical Summit. As we all know, the voice around protectionism is only getting shriller across the world. With supply disruptions experienced after the pandemic, the threat of geopolitical tensions on account of China, and with growth itself becoming difficult to come by, India is toying the same path. The term Atmanirbhar or self-reliance is a crude reminder of the Nehruvian era of import substitution. The government has already announced the first PLI scheme for APIs, and the next one is in the works. How do we really take this rather quick and easy plucking of replacing imports with local manufacturing to create more enduring growth without compromising on the competitiveness across the pharmaceutical value chain? The topic for this panel is accelerating growth, where to push, where to pull back. We have a set of very eminent speakers for this discussion. Mr. Sunil Punjabi, Managing Director and Country Speaker, Merck India, Head of Research Solutions Business for Merck Life Science. Mr. Varun Vijay Rao, Chief Procurement Officer at Aceto US. Dr. Girish Dixit, President and Executive Director, Eisai Pharmaceuticals India. And Dr. Dinesh, Chairman, Pharmaceutical Export Promotion Council of India. May I request Hardik, my co-moderator, just to speak a few words.
Welcome, everyone, on behalf of Outlook team and also Innovassynth, and pleasure to have another round of conversations, maybe for the next 45 minutes. So look forward for a great feedback. And I think one of the things which I think is this panel is a combination of pharma, the government body, the life science piece of it, and also the kind of a sourcing hub. So I'm sure this will be a great conversations, Mahalakshmi, as we move forward.
Sure. So first off is really, let's just dive into this discussion. First of all, is self-reliance really a good ideal to pursue at all? And if at all, looking at India's primary strengths when it comes to this entire gamut of chemicals and pharmaceuticals, where exactly should we be focusing as a nation? May I request Mr. Punjabi?
Thank you. Thanks for having me on this panel. I think I can just sit back and think of an aeroplane which goes through emergency situation, and they give you instruction that in case of emergency, put your mask first before you help the others. I think looking at this pandemic, what government has tried to do during this period or even before that, it realized because of geopolitical issues, challenges which have come through the pandemic or otherwise, that there should be some minimum requirements met within the country when it comes to the critical. I do not think Atmanirbhar means that you will do everything in-house, and there are enough talked about that. But what it talks about it, that in such events, are there capabilities, the so-called people around those capabilities available to ensure that we support it? It could be for food, it could be for medicine, it could be for defense-related things. That's what government is trying to do. So is it a good thing? I would say yes, the minimum deterrent and minimum requirement to, as a country, to face it, and if required to scale it up, I would say yes. We have some areas where we are doing very well, and in some areas where we may have over the years, I would say, believe that we do not need it, but maybe the pandemic, years of geopolitical situation has given us a signal that it is, and the government trying to support it. So personally, yes, it's a good thing to go.
Sure.
Okay,
Dr.
so
Dixit? Yeah, sorry.
It's an interesting subject. So I may quite quickly pitch in. Since Sunil, you mentioned about the geopolitical risk mitigation, and when the government actually released some APIs in early 2020 to mitigate that risk, how did your company leverage this opportunity overall in offering the, what we probably call localized raw materials to some of the Indian big pharma companies? Did you do something differently to grab that opportunity?
Yeah, I would take a couple of examples. One is for the country requirement and one is for the global requirement. I don't think as a company we were looking government's incentive, but we were looking at the challenge. And because a lot of times that challenge actually helps you to overcome situations And you also realize that there's icing on the cake by some incentives also around. So take an example that prior to pandemic, there were some products coming to India from other part of the globe or from Asia, which became a challenge because you could see that the problem was in those countries, but they didn't want to supply. It is not that they didn't want to support you, they had their own challenges and they wanted to address. Some could be as a raw material or some could be the diagnostic manufacturing products. What we did, we raised out to that occasion as a company and looked at some processes we had overseas or developed in-house and look at. Some we did in-house, ourselves and within Merck. Some we talked to our partners in the market and say, can you scale it for us? Because they have the capability. So again, I would like to bring it. It's not that everything has to be done in-house. There are a lot of capabilities in the country. You can go up to them, have an NDA or CDA signed and do that. That is one. The second is what I was saying, global needing something and the global demand was coming down, going up and not everybody was able to support. We could produce that in India and even support the global demand for diagnostic manufacturing raw material. We also send that information to DBT that we have this material now. If anybody needs it, we could support them. So a couple of examples for good reasons. I think, yes, it's helping.
All right.
Sure. Varun, if I may turn to you, I mean, you source from all kinds of locations. And one of the worries has always been that, you know, any industry that is protected beyond, and there is a government push towards procuring from from local players, it's always challenge for companies to make a commercial decision when there is a gap. Can you just lay down the competitive landscape for us in terms of where is India in terms of competitiveness for intermediates, APIs? Because for us at stake is a large formulations business where India has a larger stake. So where do we figure? And if there are fears about, you know, localization, escalating costs, is it real or can it be surmounted?
Okay, so obviously I bring a different perspective than my other esteemed panelists over here. My interest is in, let's go back to the incentives for a second. I think Sunil already covered major points, but I believe there's about 53, 54 APIs in that incentive plan. It's a production-linked incentive. We don't have production in India, but what we do have is a significant supply base. We source over $60 million from India. That is up year over year. If I go back 3-4 years, and it's been a consistent growth. And when I look at the competitive landscape, clearly, the first name that comes to anybody's mind would be China. Now, with the tariffs imposed on China and the recent environmental blue sky initiatives that China has gone through, that actually presents an opportunity for India. And I'm seeing that real time because we actually source over 100 million from China and India is a bit smaller. And if I go back to just my 2020 data, I've already seen a meaningful shift. Now, does that mean India is competitive? Not necessarily, in my opinion. What that means is we are just de-risking China. There are tariffs. We don't know what's going to happen with the geopolitical situation going forward. So I'd be hard pressed to say the new regime would come in and change everything that the prior regime has done. So our assumption, the assumptions we're working on is the tariffs will continue. And if anything between the tariffs and the blue sky initiatives where a lot of Chinese suppliers are being shut down by the government, which by the way, I think is a good thing. They're doing it for the right reasons. That really presents an opportunity for India. The incentive plan itself, is it enough? I don't think we have an answer to that yet. I mean, only in November, they announced this incentive plan, but going forward, when it's actually implemented, then my interest would be to go to my suppliers and say, all right, I'm ready for a cost down because you've received an incentive from the government, right? So that's just a different perspective. I hope I addressed your question.
Sure. Yeah,
I mean, Varun, interestingly, you kind of mentioned that about $60 million of products you're outsourcing to India. So I can imagine this would be probably twofold from China at this point in time. I mean, as a global procurement head, I mean, like, what do you see that we need to do? I mean, in terms of, let's say, if you talk about your company, how do you see that you can shift that needle towards India in order to really, outsource some of the raw materials from the contract manufacturing, a lot of contract manufacturing companies within India? I mean, do you have some kind of a strategy roadmap in front of you?
Absolutely. Obviously, I can't share details, but we constantly look at even acquisitions around the globe. India being a low-cost manufacturing, destination is clearly on the preferred list. You have companies like Merck and my good friend Sunil that have set up and grown in India and invested in technology in India in this field over the past few years. So, I mean, there are a lot of lab facilities in Gujarat, in Telangana. I'm sure you know that, Hardik, your company, Innovassynth itself is, trying to get there to the forefront of, technology and nucleotides and other sort of products.
Right.
So when I look at something like that, and let's talk about Innovassynth, why don't we give a real example? So
yeah, sure.
Innovassynth, I see Aceto and Innovassynth as an example among other players in India being partners to service the globe. So you have a strength in manufacturing the product. We don't desire to have an immediate strength in manufacturing. So
Sure.
I see something like that as a perfect marriage. So when you talk about contract manufacturing, CMOs, CDOs, things like that, we are absolutely happy to work with them. That being said, I think Aceto also recognizes that our future growth potential is really, it will really come from entering the manufacturing space, not from distribution, pure play distribution that we have today. And that's our strategy. If you look at what we've done, we made 2 small acquisitions, which are publicly announced. One of them is called Ilchem, which is in a New York-based company. Okay. And they are experts in niche manufacturing. And we also acquired another company called Syntor in UK that has good lab facilities. So we are moving in that direction. Both are small, but as we move forward, we start looking at other regions around the globe, including India, for potential opportunities for an acquisition, for a joint venture, for a marketing and sales distribution agreement, what have you, different forms of a marriage. Like our discussions with Innovassynth. So that's something that's really exciting to me. I know it is to you as well.
Yep.
So that's the way we grow for us, for Aceto.
Doctor, what do you think? I mean, you're a kind of a scientist in the room, and what Sunil did mention, about some of the localization things which Merck is doing right now. How do you see this from the scientific point of view? I mean, like, I'm sure as you do the R&D and do a kind of a scale up, there will be increasing pain points, because getting the right quality of products with the right regulatory support and supply chain transparency is always challenging. So how do you see this? If India starts supporting your company for getting all the raw materials right from R&D scales to a multi-scale bulk manufacturing scale, how do you see this momentum shifting from traditional China to India?
Thank you, Hardik. As you know that Japan is very conservative society, and even the culture of Japan and my own company itself is very different.
Right.
And we talk about quality, whereas Japan talk about quality over quality. So we will have to be more and more careful. And we have spent around 12 years in India, right. And we are growing with more than 15% every year. And the reason is the kind of trust we have built for Japanese companies. We have created and made many strategic partnerships with many Japanese clients, those who are requesting us to utilize generic skill available in India, in our own organization in India itself, and how we can support entire Japanese patient by providing very high quality APIs and formulation to Japan on Chinese price. And that is possible based on the scientific skill available in India. And you know that we talk about quality by design, we are talking about PET tools and other things. And we would like to move out from our traditional scientific workforce to a scientific understanding, investigation, and
root cause analysis that is really supporting us to develop a very high quality key starting material, intermediate, and API, and providing and meeting the Chinese price. And that is what is really very interesting for us, that Japan is investing more and more in India. Our own company is investing more and more in India to improve our capacity, and they are directly linking that no procurement from China. If you are buying anything from China, we would not like you to develop any manufacturing process for API. So this is the kind of condition or terms they are putting on us, and this is really challenging. But at the same time, it is very interesting for us that how the community itself, the pharmaceutical or healthcare system, is moving out from one big major player to India. And this is our responsibility to ensure that we develop scientifically, whether it is common raw material or critical raw material or intermediate, the way we can meet quality requirement of Japan and other regulated market around the world, and as we can meet the domestic requirement as set by government. So we are really very positive. Japan is positive, and our own organization is very positive. And I believe that changing scenario is bringing up more and more responsibility on the shoulder of Indian pharmaceutical industry. So we are.
Dr. Dixit, it's a very fantastic ideal. I mean, it's even as a line to think about it, Japanese quality at Chinese prices seems like, a fantastic pursuit. But can you just expound on how do you do that? I mean, what are the levers that you can really exploit to crack this equation? Somewhere to get cost advantages, either your inputs have to be really low cost, or the general infrastructure costs have to be low, or labor has to be low, or you need to devise a far more superior, efficient processes, which saves a lot. So what is the secret ingredient, and is there a leap for everyone else in India to to be able to replicate that model? Where do you really make that?
Mahalakshmi, you know that in India, the culture or concept is that to get raw material or key raw material from China or any other country which is providing at low cost, it is very easy for them to meet our quality standard. But in proportion, the cost will increase. What we are doing here is integration of our suppliers based on the chemistry or scientific skill they have and the collaborative technical advantage we are providing to them. So when it comes to very normal or common raw material, we design the processes, we support them to improve the capability in terms of science they have. So when we are designing the specification based on the scientific capability in collaboration with the very low size contract manufacturing organization or mid-term or mid-size contract manufacturing organization, and we as an Eisai. So we discuss about the technical part on the raw material, key starting material and intermediate, and we design those space which ultimately bring down the cost and improve the quality. So it is not a rocket science, but integration of scientific capability of low size CMO to up to the Eisai, and bringing down together and reducing the cost, meeting all quality standard. This is very simple exercise our team is doing, but we are achieving the Chinese price.
Why do we need the PLI, I say then? But on that note, Dr. Dua, I mean, your insights on what has been the thinking in the government with respect to designing the PLI, and can you give us some sense of where we are headed and what is in the works for the second PLI?
First of all, my gratitude to all the co-panelists as well as to the organizers for accommodating me for today, because we had an AGM for Pharmexcil yesterday, and I couldn't avoid that. That was Ministry of Commerce for you. Let me give you a perspective of Indian pharmaceutical industry. I've been associated post my MBA from Ahmedabad in '79 till date in pharmaceuticals, except for a little hiatus in Reliance Industries for polymers and paints to some extent. You see, in the 70s and the 80s, India was doing amazingly well post Uruguay round of talks, right? And by 89 or 90 or thereabouts, when I was heading as president of Zydus Kerala Healthcare API division, we were numero uno in the world in terms of both key starting raw materials, which is fermentation based, 4 of them, and small fermentation as well. And then we had the APIs and intermediates. I distinctly recall an instance that a Chinese supplier came through an agent in Mumbai and supplied us Etopostat an intermediate. And within 2 days, we knocked them out of our factory because the quality was atrocious from China. Lo and behold, give it another 2 years, they came back and they said, free of cost, we'll incur the damages in case your batches fail or whatever goes wrong in terms of the impurity profiling. And believe you me, their quality was better than anybody else in India on Etopostat, because Lipitor at that point in time was very big, and we had the generic version of Etopostat in India. We instantly shifted, mind you, and this is going to be mind-blowing, at 50% of our variable cost. Incredible. Now, what does it tell you? It tells you something very simple. The government of China was wholeheartedly supporting the Chinese pharmaceutical industry through an economic model which is very differentiated. You know, they would create pharma parks of the size of astounding 10,000 hectares, which is about 25,000 acres, give them electricity free, moratorium for 5 years, give them, all the utility for that matter free, and 5 years moratorium on the EMIs to be paid back, right? So it's payable if at all, kind of a situation. And they created so much a massive demand that, the supply was equating with whatever was available in these pharma parks, and plenty of them around, in about 10 years' time. So for 10 years, they didn't have to think anything at all. And even today, I mean, they are sufficiently endowed with the global capacities of penicillin G. All the roads lead to China. Nobody, mind you, nobody in the world manufactures penicillin G. 7-ACA, of which my company, Necro Life Sciences, is the largest buyer in the world, 7-ACA, right? Nobody manufactures. Novartis used to manufacture. They shut shop in Frankfurt and went to China. I mean, they just closed up. DSM, the largest manufacturer of Pen-G, went out to China, created a joint venture with Sinopharm, and that's how this was taken over by a PE fund. So look at this paradigm shift of being in numero uno leadership position in the 90s, letting it go to China, and we are again here. For 10 years, I've personally been associated with the movement from the Indian pharma industry in a very substantial manner to give us a level playing field, right? They give 12% incentive on exports, on anything and everything, and they do it in such a smart manner that a pharmaceutical company gets the incentive in a remotely associated, government company. Can you beat it? So WTO doesn't capture it at all. Neither do we capture it. So we've been saying to the earlier disposition of UPA, now NDA, right? Do something about it. The figures speak for themselves. The Indian pharma industry is valued currently at about $42 billion, vertically divided 50-50 into domestic $21 billion and exports $21 billion with a growth of about 10% in exports and about 9 to 11% in domestic. 95% of the domestic industry formulation is vulnerably dependent on the Chinese API, KSMs, and whole host of other inputs, ingredients, right? And it is only after COVID, every challenge has an opportunity. And I look at COVID as a great opportunity for government of India to have realized, because of geopolitical tensions, which co-panelists referred to, right? And suddenly, Niti Aayog became very receptive. PMO became very receptive. As chairman of Pharmexcil, I was invited to a number of meetings to deliberate with the industry what needs to be done. And when they realized, and Pharmexcil was on the forefront of it, a study was conducted by our Ministry of Commerce and Pharmexcil, which laid open the fact that if China pulls the plug on you, the domestic pharmaceutical industry is going to go haywire, completely smashed, right? And obviously that's not going to happen, but the possibility was definitely there at some point in time. And they said, well, what is it that we can do? We told them that, look, it's got to be done in a graduated manner. What China as a behemoth has built up in the last 2 decades cannot be built overnight. And that's how the PLI scheme was devised. Technologies are there. We were ahead of the curve against China for anything and everything, but they evolved big time, particularly through the American Chinese who came back to China with stolen technologies or otherwise. So now is the time when technologies are there, or technologies are available, that India could become self-sufficient in a graduated manner. Rome was not built in a day. So we said, look, in KSMs, penicillin G, clavulanic acid, erythromycin, 7-ACA, 4 of these, 20% incentive is going to be given. And this would take care of self-sufficiency to the extent of about 50% in 5 years' time. I'm very confident about it. Then in case of other chemical APIs and otherwise, the gestation period is not more than a year. The technologies are definitely available. India can bounce back and make sure that in about 7 years' time, we'll be 100% self-sufficient. And mind my words and hold me to it. In about 10 years' time, you would gun for China, because as Dr. Girish Dixit said so eloquently, and my company works with Otsuka and Astellas in a very sizable way, in terms of NEPRX, right? And you're absolutely spot on, Dr. Girish, that what we bring to the table to Otsuka and to Astellas, nobody does. They hate the word China, right? And so is the case with the other geographies of the world. Europe doesn't like China at all. US, I don't see any change in China policy. May not be as bad as Trump, but will be closely on border with Biden taking over tomorrow. So that being said, I think India is in an eminent position, not only to become self-sufficient in about 7 to 10 years' time, depending on the molecule, but we would be a great supplier of wonderful pharmaceutical APIs and KSMs to the whole world. We are a pharmacy to the world. We supply 200.
That sounds absolutely phenomenal music to everyone's ears. But my question is this, at least taking a leaf out of all other industries, everywhere in the world, I mean, like you rightly pointed out, China devised an economic model around which, costs could be as much as 50% what India was offering at that time. And that economic model kind of continued for a length of time, so much so that the plants and machinery that was put out there could go through that cycle. The capital cost could be recovered. And today, if US imposes a 24% tariff, they are still, I know from Varun told me that they are still able to compete in US markets. It's not that their share has gone down. Even today, they are able to, despite the tariff, be able to competitive. That is because they have laid that foundation of an economic model that makes them competitive. Now, my question
Mahalakshmi,
is...
I want to come in here. There's a wrong perception, Mahalakshmi, here. Let me correct that, please. If you say that for chemicals, I would agree with you. Today, our imports from China of KSM's API intermediates is of the order of $2.68 billion. And what's our exports of APIs predominantly to the regulated markets? $4 billion. They don't stand a chance. They don't have regulatory landscape. They cannot face audits except the top 10 companies. They can't face the audits. So what you're saying does not apply to API formulations. They're way ages behind. Does not apply to regulated markets at all.
I agree. In terms of regulated market, absolutely. But when I look at a company like Aceto, our spend. So Mahalakshmi, you were pointing to my comments earlier, because I'm looking at a broader perspective beyond just the pharmaceutical market, because we also source specialty chemicals.
Right.
We source nutraceuticals, cosmetics, based products for cosmetics. Now,
Right.
in those areas, there are certain pockets where India, I think, shines through. But for the most part, I heard all of the sentiments of Japan not wanting to hear the word China, and all that is true. But at the end of the day, you know, your sentiment aside, we have to make a financial decision. And, you know, fortunately in my position, I have the view of, let me put it simply, I get a quotation from India, I get a quotation from China. A lot of times the difference is still drastic. So when I look at it, I'm thinking, and I'm not close enough, so Dr. Dua, you're definitely a lot closer to this, but I'm thinking this PLI, is it enough? And, you know, we were talking about a total of 7,000 crores, $1 billion in that neighborhood. And I don't know how that gets distributed among the companies, who gets favored and why, all of those politics kick in. But at the end of the day, for my supply base, what are they going to get out of it? Which means for me, what am I going to get out of it, if anything? And if it is not much, then, you know, you tend to gravitate back towards China, which of course we don't want to do. But again, it will be a financial decision, not a sentimental one.
I'd just like to put another dimension to this. You know, this PLI scheme for pharmaceuticals at 20% and 10%, 20% for KSM's fermentation, 10% for the rest of it, 41 molecules in all, was rather solely intended for the domestic industry, point one, right? There is a study which I can share with you, Varun, which is done by KPMG with CII. I'm also the chairman of CII Life Sciences, right? I'll share that with you. The differential in pharma, not in chemicals, right, is to the extent of about 24%, right? So this kind of incentive that we are providing, 20% and 10%, first of all, will cater to domestic, and then they'll lead to export. So give it another 2, 3, 4 years, Varun, and you will find India becoming competitive.
Look, I have it on my KRS to move sourcing from China to India. So, you know, no, that's a fact. So, so that's what
even Indian customers, Varun, I mean, what is the sense that you get from Indian formulation producers? Are they just equally, I mean, price sensitive of all the entire world? And I would like to think that India would be the real hard negotiators in terms of price.
Yeah, look, we are Indian. We are Indians, right? We love a bargain. So you're absolutely right. You know, selling to Indian customers is even tougher. We don't really have a large customer base in India. We sell a bit to us. You know, Sun Pharma is one of our customers. We sell Carbidopa, among other things. But you know, the value proposition is really not there, to be honest. You know, it's more Sun Pharma, in this particular case, doesn't want the headache of going through the regulatory process. We do that for them. So we're taking that off their plate. That's our value add, right? And that's our value add around the globe. But at the same time, they're also a cost-sensitive customer. So I need to get my costs under control to be able to have a meaningful customer relationship while making a good enough margin at our end as well.
Sure.
But Dr. Dua, what you said is music to my ears. I can't wait for that to happen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
sure, certainly.
I'll
let me have your email ID. I'll send you the report. It's an eye opener.
Absolutely. I mean, if it were left to me in 3 years, I'd like to flip what we have and have 120 million from India and 60 from
China. Amazing.
What I'd like
and how much from elsewhere?
Oh, I know. So globally, we spend our spend is over $300 million, but in between India and China, it's about 120 in China and 60 in India. What I was saying was, I'd love to be able to flip that.
Sure. And one more thing, another aspect to it is that look, as far as Indian industry is concerned, we in formulations, where we are the biggest in the world, controlling 30% of the genetic space, right? We let the initiative go to the Chinese because they were dumping away the glory. I have today a recorded version of my boss, Mr. Piyush Goyal, the Honorable Minister for Commerce and Industry, stating, excuse me, that if China dumps away the glory after the PLI kicks in, first of all, interim duty will be immediately imposed in 1 month time, right? Customs, which is not under the purview of WTO, to the extent of 40% can be imposed. So the industry remains absolutely protected, excellent quality, excellent documentation. We have the largest number of FDA-approved plants outside the US, right? And highest number of ANDAs and drug master files. What else do you want? So times to come in will definitely herald.
This is what gets us really worried. the answer to everything can't be that we can, we have this ammunition to raise tariffs and protect our industry, because that's what has made us come here.
No, Mahalakshmi, no. Please correct your version. Mind you, these are possibilities. When China dumps away to glory at 50% of my cost, right, with a differential of only 25%, nobody raised a finger. Today, when there are geopolitical tensions, everybody in the formulation industry, 12,000 of them, came running to the government saying, please do something about it, right? So this is just a possibility if China resorts to dumping away to glory. This is not going to be done unless it is necessitated.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about something on the KSM or maybe intermediate space. Maybe if I can talk about my several earlier days in R&D. I think one of the challenges which I always used to get is to get the right material. It's not the cost which would drive the decision-making process, right? It's all about total cost of ownership, right? Getting the right material with the right regulatory support and supply chain transparency. So would you agree? Maybe Varun or Sunil can take this question. How do you see, Varun? In Indian pharma or Indian contract manufacturing space, would you be getting the right supplier who are actually talking about not the price but the quality and regulatory support, and at a price point which is acceptable to the end customers? And probably Dr. Dixit, you can also add in, because I think that's the creep one. I mean, for me, the output at the most critical step in the chemistry, which is, let's say, N-1, which is 25th step, matter most. Then I will be worrying about the price of the raw materials, right? I mean, it's about the regulatory support and getting the right quality and consistently. So sometimes, at least companies like us, we do get some challenges. We do not outsource any of the materials even today with a supplier which is not of a great repute, for especially N-2, N-3 stage. So what do you think? I mean, right now, would you be in a position to get the right quality and kind of a preferred supplier within India? And that's one question. And the second question, maybe I'm just mixing this too. In India also, there are many times a challenge to get a supplier or a manufacturer who would be able to compete with the expertise which Chinese manufacturers have developed. It could be a different chemistry, be it a peptide chemistry, or be it some of the high scale boron chemistry. You'll always have a challenge of getting the right consistent manufacturers who would be consistently offering these products. So how do you see these two things, moving forward when we are talking about India as a, we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat. Can we be really a self-reliant? Maybe Varun, you can pick up this question.
So I'll take the first part of the question. I'll let Dr. Dixit is a lot more qualified to address the second part of the question. But so, look, I agree with Dr. Dua. If when it comes to FDA, GMP, any kind of certification and regulatory bound products, we tend to look at India very favorably over China because of the adherence and compliance to those norms. So, one part of it is audit. So take API. So APIs, you audit them every 2 years, right? That's when you do a formal audit. Now, what happens between that 2-year time frame? That's a cause for concern always. Whereas in India, it's less of a cause of concern. I won't say it's not. I mean, quality issues can happen anywhere, anytime. And that's where we have our checks and balances in place. Around the globe, we have our regulatory qualified personnel who could do continuous audits and continuous checks with suppliers. But we would still prefer to go to India because of the adherence to these. In China, I know of suppliers, obviously can't name them, but I know of suppliers where we have been left hanging because they got caught in an audit issue. So we had to shut them down. Meaning we had to shut off supply and try and move immediately somewhere else. Now, in an API, you can't do that overnight. Just the regulatory audits take several months, if not longer. So so for that reason, we would always look at a de-risking strategy where A, we have an alternate supply base, and B, we spread the risk geographically. So if our primary supply is in China today, then we look for a supply in India. And if this primary supply is in India, then we actually look for a second supplier in India. So that's how we're doing it.
Okay, right. But maybe a question to Sunil. I mean, you have a largest portfolio of research chemicals, and you are catering into a diagnostic market, even the academia and the CRO, CMO. And your business, I'm sure, must be really mushrooming. How do you see that shift when the CMO or the R&D or the pharma process development guys really go for a scale up? I mean, that's where the total cost of ownership comes into picture. How do you see this as an opportunity as you move forward and penetrate into a right from drug discovery to the phase 1, phase 2 and commercializations? Can you penetrate it faster, or do you see a challenge?
So, Hardik, I would put a couple of points here. First, I am a strong believer China is not going to go anywhere. We all need to be very clear that China is going to be there. But do we have today another supplier or other country which can balance from a geopolitical or challenge point of view? I think Dr. Dua rightly mentioned, to make an entry, the China gave the price which you could not refuse. And at that time, government of India didn't want to give any benefits or PLIs at that moment, and they took it away. Otherwise, today, government of India is giving those advantages. We will walk into that, and capability and other things will take time to build. So that is more on people will look at what are those 20% products which will give 80% coverage. The government has priority on 40 or 176 chemicals or 41 APIs. So that priority is clear with government, and that priority is clear with us. Now coming to your second question, which is a company which is offering these raw materials or the chemicals. We go with the same approach, 80-20 principle. What is my 20% of the portfolio where I may have 80% of the business and I can de-risk it by having one more supplier? And I would fall back on what Varun said. At the end, it's business. At the end, it is, and business doesn't mean the cheap price. Business means business continuity. And that is what we are trying to do here, is to see that I have multiple suppliers, I have a security of supplies, I have the right quality product. But this is also a fact that if your customer doesn't look at the quality the way you are looking at, like Japan, quality on quality, then you may look at the cost also. But on the other side, you have government support, as Dr. Dua mentioned, that if somebody, whether it's today China, tomorrow it could be, if they try to play in a way where our governments have got now more cautious, they know that it's critical for the country, supply security is critical, they will support you. So it is not a question of Mahalakshmi's point that somebody will increase the duty. It's just the protection of self-interest and protecting. So I would say, coming back, Hardik, to your point, I think everybody is looking at 80-20 principle, securing their 80% of that business, which comes from 20% product. Once we are done with that, it may take 3-4 years. We will look at the next basket. And that's what we are trying to do globally as well as in India.
And Sunil, I mean, you're right. It's not just cost, it's value. I mean, when I look at a supplier, what value are they bringing me? And the regulatory part is a big part of the value, right? So it's not always the lowest cost that wins.
My limited point to this, although we shouldn't drag this conversation because all of you are in agreement and that's what is important, is that when you have put large capacities at a low cost and you're sitting on all kinds of depreciated assets, pricing can be a game, And now the thing is, who is to say till what point in time can that really continue? You can increase tariffs. The question is there a way to leverage on this and create something that is valuable, competitive, durable in the long run from a global perspective? So where I come from, whether it is steel or, there is a case for anti-dumping duty in steel, but for a nation which is rolling out its infrastructure woefully inadequate, should we really be, raising the tariffs and keeping our steel industry alive and kicking and have 20-30% higher infrastructure cost is definitely a question I would like to ask. So similarly, since large part of our Indian pharma industry, we've built those capabilities in formulations, and the future lies in other areas like maybe biosimilars and stuff like that. Should our incentive system be driven a little more towards the future in terms of where the future is going to be? How do we, win the next round than to go back and take away a slice of what's created? So that's where I'm coming from. Maybe Sunil can, he's smiling, so you should definitely add depth to this or refute it, whatever you please.
No, Mahalakshmi, you're perfectly all right. And that is not what government is trying to do in India. See, within WTO, there is something, a provision that anti-dumping. So anti-dumping means if another country is trying to play, you as a country have the right to support it and see that your industry is not getting affected. I think Dr. Dua rightly mentioned, either you give companies upfront lot of incentives to get into manufacturing, you do not pay the electric tariff, you do not have to look at the quality systems related to EHS practices, and you can generate a lot of material and sell cheaper because it's at the low cost of the capital. But of is that I produce it, I invest it. So government scheme today is not, government is not giving upfront anything to anybody. What I have understood, they are saying you invest, you produce, there will be manufacturing linked schemes, and these products are required by the country first. That's why they have been identified. They have not been identified because they are global, because global exports bring some benefit otherwise also, which people were taking advantage of. So it's a combination. So I don't think we need to get that concerned that government is trying to put tariff barriers, or the government cannot do it under WTO. And whatever it has to be doing, it has to also show that it is in relationship to the country. It could be country China or country X, Y, Z. There are other countries which want to dump their food products sometime. So we need to be very mindful of that. It's not that government can unilaterally go and put that. They have to show as a case, because then it has to defend that case in the WTO. So it's a very, very balanced approach, I would say. But I would definitely like Dr. Dua to step in, because he deals with these things day in, day out. So he can definitely give more color to it.
Also, Dr. Dua, if you can expound a little bit on what is the next round going to look like? Is it more of the same? Is it a completely different tack? Are we looking at something totally different?
I sincerely hope that all of us have read the text of PLI 2. It's already been announced. It's work in process. I'm deeply involved in that. And whatever you said, Mahalakshmi, whatever and beyond is being covered. It covers innovation. It covers soon to be genericized complex generic molecules. It covers cell therapy, stem cell, biologics, biosimilars, excipients, you name it. And the quantum is double the quantum of what's been offered to the generic pharma. So that's about 15,000 or 16,000 crores. And I can also confide in you, without naming, that the government is prepared for another PLI 3 also, to gradually take India to the path of innovation, where we are not scratching, outside of top 100 companies, we're not even scratching the surface. The depth of innovation which sits in Indian academia is unbelievable. 90% of the innovation in the Western, majority of my co-panelists come from multinational, where they're located in Japan, US, as well as in Europe, right? Has come from academia. But in our country, unfortunately, I'm deeply involved from CII in that as well. Nothing is coming out because academia is very happy sitting quietly, getting their patents, getting their Lancet publications, making a dissertation, getting promotions, and that's the end of it. I have, along with wonderful friends in the industry, gone ahead and told PMO, cut 50% of the subsidization of financing to the universities and tell them to adopt the American and European model, Japanese model, to earn and burn. If that happens, Mahalakshmi, you will see a revolution in this country in the next 2 decades.
Sure. So, quick question to Dr. Dixit and Sunil. What does all this mean, like the PLI 1, 2, and now 3 he's talking about, which we have no clue about. Even 2 is hazy. But what does it mean from a company perspective for you? What do you do more out of from India? How does it change in any way the prism with which you look at the Indian landscape in terms of manufacturing, in terms of outsourcing, in terms of research? How does it change things for you as a company?
Mahalakshmi, thank you, Dr. Dua, for sharing the information about PLI 3 or next beyond innovation and all. And I was about to talk about innovation, that what we are talking today is mainly about generic pharmaceutical industry and generic based in India. The most of the time when I discuss and participate in conference in a multinational organization, most of them they talk about whether India is a reliable supply partner for rest of the world. So we would like to bring that trust to other countries, and we'll have to ensure that while we are vocal for local, at the same time we are there to take care of rest of the world. We as an innovator organization, we are diverting our attention for innovation in India. There are many hurdles when we do our different clinical trial and creating clinical trial material and supplying to global community for clinical activities. We develop the process, we manufacture clinical trial material, but when it comes to start of filing NDA in the US, because US is the largest country and everyone file NDA there, the Trade Agreement Act or Veteran Affairs, these kind of hurdles always come in the picture. And most of the multinational company, they don't have any other option to take this technology from India, identify the base in Europe and US or Japan, start filing NDA from that country, and we again come back to our original situation that we may be considered as third source, fourth source, or fifth source later on when the LOE is there. So I think that there is a strong demand for the future. We should come out from generic mind and try to figure out what exactly we would like to be after 10 years, 20 years in terms of innovation. So our target should not be in short term providing incentive to the 53 APIs to be manufactured in India, but it should go beyond that, and we should create more and more reverse innovation in India. Their company like Eisai, they are willing to do innovation in India. They want to launch the new product in India based on the feedback or the patient reality. We would like to relaunch these products in US and Europe or developed world, but we need support to do those kind of innovation in India. So as Dr. Dua has mentioned, this is the right time to involve academia, industry and subject matter expert together, and let us try to find out what is the next step of China, because China is listening to us. What they are going to do later on, we should be get ready for that. That is our big challenge, and we need to really work on that part.
Quickly, your company strategy.
Our company is very clear. They want to get trust from India. They are keep investing not only in product development, drug discovery, regulatory filing and all, but at the same time, huge capital investment. But with the positive mindset, government will take extra initiative to support innovation in India. So the strategy is clear: innovation for regulatory filing, but not on the stake of compromise on many things.
Sure. Sunil, your company strategy in terms of what do you do more out of India, what do you do less out of India?
So a couple of points. First, the comment I would like to make, I can just say that I totally agree with Dr. Dixit and Dr. Dua, because I work very closely with the government institutions, which directly and indirectly are involved with the innovation part of it. And I think the government of the day have very less patience today. They've been chasing, whether it is DRDOs of the world or CSR of the world, that we want translational research. We want research which can bring innovation and help people at the ground. So a lot of work we see from these institutions coming, but we also have to become a little, I would say, patient, because the patience is required, because innovation doesn't happen overnight. But yeah, it doesn't take also decades also. So I would give it a reasonable shakeup has happened, but any adversity like COVID kind of what we are facing today also makes you wake up to the situation and raise up to the occasion. That's what I see. Coming to your question, what are companies like Merck doing in the space when they look at the country specific? Honestly, I don't think a company like Merck look at one country or the other. They look at the business case purely. They look at that if I have to work in a country like India, what is customers looking in India from a research point of view, or they're looking for commercialization, how I can make things happen closer to the customer. Nobody's interested in going all the way to Europe or this thing. And if it makes business case closer, the better. Because that way you can keep the supply security intact, you can keep innovation intact closer. So that is first strategy of the Merck world that, hey, let's bring. But what if what we have developed something here now is required for some part of the other world? We do not go and invest in the other part of the world unless it is optimum there. So naturally that becomes our second reflection, hey, what I have produced here, I will be trying to export that, which is a normal reflection, but clearly driven by the country requirements, country needs, country political and geopolitical requirements, and that's what Merck is trying to do.
Hardik's
Maybe, yeah, a quick question on the COVID-19. I think Dr. Dua did mention about the opportunities which emerge after COVID-19. And there are also cases in the specialty chemical segment, especially. You talk more on the pharma piece of it, but you talk about specialty chemicals, and you have seen companies who are making additives which go into automobile sectors. They have badly, they really got a great hit in terms of the revenue. And maybe this is a question maybe for Aceto, for Varun. When you talk about the specialty chemical outsourcing in a non-pharma space, after the COVID, did the outsourcing change in terms of your overall spend on the outsourcing, or it has gone up? Because if you talk about the fragrances and flavors segment, maybe there might have some impact versus the pharma outsourcing piece.
Yeah, so overall, actually, it's a factor of product mix, but overall, what we saw was a fairly good balance year over year. It didn't really go down. Now, if you look at a specific segment, so when you say specialty chemicals, it's pigments, dyes, things like that go into a variety of industry. So while automobiles may have gone down, I think food consumption, everyone sort of put on weight in COVID, right? So the kind of foods and the kinds of, it's not just the food, but it's also the kind of food. With the your local sabzi mandi being closed, you tend to lean towards the big baskets and the Amazons of the world for your supply. And therefore you're consuming products which now have additives in them versus you would go and buy it fresh pre-COVID. So if you look at the changes in the way you're consuming, during and perhaps even in the post-COVID era, it may have to some extent permanently altered habits of individuals. Then going forward, the specialty chemicals industry, I think, still has a lot of opportunity. When I look at what I intend to spend on specialty chemicals in 2021, it's actually more than in 2020. So it's year-over-year growth as well, despite the fact that the hope is that COVID will sort of subside during this year with all the vaccinations out. I don't think that will adversely affect habits. Now, it's very conceivable. Let's just take the Zoom call as an example, right? We are sitting here. It's highly effective. I mean, not as effective as sitting on a panel in a room. I get that. But, in the future, Sunil could be in London. I could be traveling somewhere. So Mahalakshmi may call us and say, hey, look, we can't get everybody in a room, but we've done Zoom before, it works. So let's do it. So I think along those lines, the habits change, and therefore the consumption patterns as relates to fragrances and food additives in particular, those two areas, I think will remain as they were during COVID times going forward.
Anything else, Hardik?
No, I think maybe I just want to ask one question maybe to everyone, maybe in one sentence. When you talk about the India as a country, what value propositions in one or two sentences, or what competitive advantage we are bringing on table, in the next 3 to 5 years? How would we emerge as a country of choice for Western world? Maybe 1 or 2 lines, starting from Dr. Dinesh.
Okay. You see, there's going to be a paradigm shift. This current political dispensation, I'm more than confident is not going to change at all, right? They've taken long-term perspectives. They've taken long-term policy decisions, and they're staying. But the stability of the government, I think, is very critical for our country, and we are in that zone, right? Irrespective of whatever may happen to China, irrespective of how US, Europe, and Japan behave, India will continue to march progressively in being self-sufficient from a domestic consumption point of view. And I'll just end up saying that this year, very proud to inform you, we will move from $20.56 billion worth of exports last year with the disruption in the last week of March to $25 billion. That's 25% increase. This is just the beginning. Let the APIs kick in and let's start exporting more and more beyond 4 billion and cut back on the imports from $2.6 billion. Be that.
Sure.
So I'd say, since you want two sentences, one, what India is going for, the one is, I think, the investment or the appetite, I should say, for investment in innovation, right? There's certainly the appetite. Now, if the government supports that with some schemes, then that's a great thing. Number two, is a largely ignored fact, age demographics. So if you look at the age in India, right, 47% of our population is at age 20 or younger, which means in the next 20 years, we have a skilled workforce coming in, whereas China has the reverse problem where they have an aging demographic. So that's why they removed their one-child policy. Right now they're saying, go have more children, because they realized that they made a mistake several decades ago with the one-child policy. And a consequence of that is the drastic increase in labor rates in China. And I think that also presents an opportunity for India. Tariffs and other things, government schemes are going to be what they are. But the reality is the labor rate in China today is 5 or 6 times that of India, the base labor rate, unskilled base labor rate. So there's an opportunity for you. And the investment in innovation, these two, I think, is what will help India grow.
Sunil, or your thoughts?
Yes, so a couple of sentences, as you said. First, I think we, as an economy or as people in this country, we are moving away from that traders to manufacturing process. We realize that where is the value chain, and that has to continue as we look at. The second is, which is even more important, see, people resilience has been always there. And when your political leadership and country leadership tells you that it is important, we need to align that people resilience with the technology. If we do that right, then I think with the technology put together and people behind it, we should be able to drive it much faster.
Dr. Dixit?
Yeah, so in 2 sentences, I would like to simply say that a very excellent initiative taken by government for Atmanirbhar Bharat, and we are going for achieving those objectives, and it is all long-term activities which everyone is going to play together. At the same time, I want that we should not forget the rest of the world. While China is being detested by many countries, this is the right time and opportunity for India to remain global and always play globally and take care of strength and expectation of the rest of the world. I was reading one statement that for India will have to run. So run means re-skill, up-skill, and a new skill. So I think that time has come and we will have to run on that part. Thank you.
Great thought.
Sure. On that absolutely optimistic note, thank you so much. It was an absolutely lively discussion, insightful for me, and compels me at least to rethink the way I have constructed this whole thing in my mind. So thank you for that. Thank you, Hardik, of course, for co-moderating this session. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.